The night air was crisp and filled with the faint hum of distant crickets as Caleb, Evelyn, and Argoz approached the wolves' territory. The gravel road ended abruptly, giving way to the dense woods that mark the perimeter of their target. Caleb killed the truck's engine, the sudden silence pressing heavily on the group. "You know the plan," Caleb said, his voice low but firm. "I'll stay here with the truck. You two go in, and Argoz—" He paused, his gaze steady on her. "Be careful." Argoz smirked, adjusting her hood. "I always am." Evelyn shot Caleb a reassuring glance before slipping out of the truck with Argoz. The two women moved quickly and silently into the underbrush, leaving Caleb to keep watch. Evelyn and Argoz moved through the woods with practiced ease, their senses on high alert. The magical wards in the area were subtle but detectable to someone like Evelyn. She stopped every few steps, murmuring incantations under her breath to temporarily mask their presence. "Watch your step," Evelyn whispered, gesturing to a faint glimmer in the air near a tree. "That's a proximity ward. We stay low, we stay slow." Argoz nodded, her movements precise and calculated as she crept ahead. Her sharp eyes scanned the area, noting the placement of small, almost invisible cameras hidden among the trees. "Clever," she murmured, "but not clever enough." They reached a small hollow just out of range of the nearest camera. Evelyn crouched down, her gaze steady on Argoz. "This is where I wait. Signal me once you've cleared a path." Argoz gave a quick nod and melted into the shadows, her lithe form moving like a whisper through the trees. The woods opened up as Argoz neared the edge of the compound. She paused, her sharp instincts urging her to climb for a better vantage point. A tall pine stood nearby, its sturdy branches offering a clear view of the area. She scaled it swiftly, her movements soundless. As she reached the top, the sprawling compound unfolded before her, illuminated by the warm glow of firelight. A large sign loomed at the edge of the clearing, the words "Welcome to the facility" etched in bold letters. The sight made her stomach twist. Something about it felt far too polished for the rustic setting. From her perch, Argoz took in the details of the facility. To the right, about 50 yards away, stood a large building. Its windows were dark and there were no signs of activity inside. Smaller structures dotted the area, some glowing faintly with light from within. The centerpiece of the compound was a sprawling pavilion. Beneath it, a bonfire crackled, casting flickering shadows over the relaxed crowd gathered around it. Laughter and the low strum of music floated through the air. People lounged on makeshift benches, chatting and drinking, their postures casual and unguarded. Roving patrols moved along the outskirts of the pavilion, their presence a stark contrast to the otherwise laid-back atmosphere. Argoz studied them closely, noting their patterns and timing. Despite the patrols and the crowd, there were no signs of the infamous wolves that Caleb had feared so much. The absence of their presence didn't ease Argoz's nerves, it heightened them. The relaxed atmosphere felt like a trap, a facade carefully constructed to lull intruders into a false sense of security. Argoz narrowed her eyes, her sharp gaze sweeping the area one last time. Something about the scene didn't add up. The facility's design was meticulous, the patrols efficient. Yet, the sense of danger that usually accompanied such places was muted. "This isn't right," she muttered to herself. She tapped her comm radio, her voice a soft whisper. "Evelyn, I'm in. I've got eyes on the facility. It's odd. Looks more like a campout than a stronghold. Sending a safe route back to you now." Evelyn crouched at the base of a massive pine tree, her breath steady as she scanned the facility's perimeter. The faint glow from the chain-link fence ahead outlined its height, 8 feet, topped with thin barbed wire. Attached to the fence, weathered "private property, no trespassing" signs hung at intervals, swaying slightly in the cool breeze. She adjusted her comm radio, her voice a whisper. "Argoz, I've reached the fence. What's your position?" Above her, hidden in the dense canopy, Argoz replied. "Still perched. You've got company, though. K9 patrol, east side." Evelyn froze, her sharp eyes narrowing as she caught movement on the other side of the fence. A handler and two large German shepherds were making their rounds, the dogs' keen noses sweeping the air. Their movements were methodical, the handler stopping every few steps to adjust his flashlight and survey the area. From her vantage point, Argoz could see the full layout of the 10-acre compound. The chain-link fence encircled the property, the main entrance barely visible at the far side, where a gate blocked access to a gravel road. Beyond the gate, faint tyre tracks hinted at regular traffic. Inside the fence, the facility's buildings were scattered across the compound. The largest, a barn-like structure, stood to the east, its faded red exterior blending into the shadows. No lights shone from within, but faint sounds carried through the night, muffled barking and the occasional clink of metal. Closer to the river at the rear of the property, cabins lined the water's edge. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, suggesting activity inside. Near the centre of the compound, the smaller building with dog runs was clearly in use. She could see the dogs pacing behind the fences, their low growls carried faintly on the breeze. The pavilion remained the heart of the compound's activity. Music played softly from a speaker, and the bonfire crackled as people chatted and laughed, their voices carrying an easy camaraderie. Roving guards patrolled in twos, their movements relaxed but purposeful. Argoz shifted her gaze to the river that bordered the compound's backside. The cabins there seemed less fortified, their wooden exteriors giving them an almost rustic appearance. A small dock jutted into the water, a rowboat tied lazily to a post. "Evelyn," Argoz whispered into her comm, "there's a way in by the river. Cabins are quieter, and there's no patrol on the water." "Noted," Evelyn replied. "But let's not forget the dogs. What's the best route?" Argoz scanned the patrol paths again, her sharp mind calculating. "Stay low and move toward the barn. It's the least active area, but you'll need to time it between patrols. The dogs are circling back now. Wait until they pass." Evelyn pressed herself lower to the ground as the K9 patrol approached. The handler paused near her position, his flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. One of the dogs stopped abruptly, its ears perking up as it sniffed the air. "Stay still," Argoz's voice crackled softly in her ear. Evelyn's heart pounded as the dog took a step closer, its keen eyes scanning the fence line. The handler tugged lightly on the leash, muttering a command under his breath. The dog hesitated but obeyed, moving forward as the patrol continued down the line. "They're clear," Argoz murmured. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her fingers gripping the earth beneath her. "You've got sharp eyes, Goblin. Let's keep it that way." As Evelyn prepared to move, a faint rustling behind her made her freeze. She turned her head slowly, her sharp eyes scanning the underbrush. For a moment the woods were still, the only sound the distant crackle of the bonfire. Then, from the shadows, a pair of glowing yellow eyes stared back at her. "Argoz," Evelyn whispered, her voice tight. "We might have company." Argoz shifted her position in the tree, her gaze snapping to Evelyn's location. "What is it? Patrol? Wolf?" "I'm not sure," Evelyn said, her fingers twitching toward the small blade strapped to her thigh. "But it's watching me." The Shadow Realm bar hummed with its usual energy. Whispers of secret deals, the clink of glasses, and the subtle tension that always simmered beneath the surface. Rose strode through the doors, her sharp eyes sweeping the crowd. Tonight, though, the usual chatter had shifted. Something in the air felt electric, the kind of buzz that hinted at big news. She moved to her usual corner table, her presence alone parting the crowd just enough to grant her space. Silas, ever watchful, appeared at her side before she'd even settled. "Busy night?" Rose asked casually, her tone light but probing. "You could say that," Silas replied, his voice low. He leaned closer, his expression unusually serious. "We need to talk. Private." Rose raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Lead the way." Silas guided her to his office, the heavy door closing behind them with a quiet thud. The room, lit by faintly glowing runes embedded in the walls, was a stark contrast to the chaos of the bar outside. Rose sank into a chair, crossing one leg over the other as she gestured for Silas to speak. "Ravina's taken a hit," Silas began, his tone measured. "A big one." Rose tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "Do tell." "The pack raided a Black Dawn safe house last night," he continued. "Took out the last of her drug supply, all of it." Rose's smirk widened, her dark eyes gleaming. "Well, well, that's going to sting." "There's more," Silas said, leaning against the desk. "They also captured the trader." At that, Rose's smirk froze for a fraction of a second before returning sharper than ever. "The trader? The same slippery little worm who's been dealing under the table for years?" Silas nodded. "The very same. And guess who took him down?" "Let me guess," Rose said, her voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. "Katrina?" Silas's faint smile confirmed it. "She made him kneel. Again." Rose laughed, a rich, delighted sound that echoed in the small office. "Oh, that's too good. Ravina must be seething right now. No drugs, no loyal underlings, just her and her overinflated ego." Silas's expression remained serious. "Don't underestimate her. A cornered predator is still dangerous." "Please," Rose said, waving a dismissive hand. "This isn't just a blow to her ego, it's a gut punch to her entire operation. And desperate people are predictable, she'll lash out. Hard." Silas nodded slowly. "And when she does?" Rose leaned back, her fingers absently brushing the bracelet on her wrist. "I'll be ready. But for now, let's let Katrina bask in her victory. It's not every day someone gets to humiliate the trader twice." Silas's gaze narrowed. "You're enjoying this a little too much, Rose. What's your angle?" Rose smirked, her dark eyes glittering with mischief. "My angle, dear Silas, is survival. Ravina's empire is crumbling, and I plan to make sure it falls. Completely, but not too quickly. I want her to squirm first." "And the trader?" Silas asked. "What do you make of him?" Rose's smirk widened. "He's a liability for her now, and an asset for anyone else who can get to him. Katrina has him for the moment, but who knows? People like him always find a way to survive. Maybe I'll cross paths with him again." Silas straightened, his tone warning. "Don't play with fire, Rose. Ravina's not going to take this lying down." Rose stood, her posture radiating confidence. "Let her come. The more desperate she gets, the easier she'll be to break." The soft crackle of static broke the tense silence in Evelyn's earpiece, followed by Rose's sharp voice dripping with sarcasm. "Team, darling. I trust you're not about to bungle this little adventure. I'd hate to have to rescue you from whatever backwoods nightmare you're wandering into." Evelyn rolled her eyes as she crouched lower, her sharp gaze fixed on the glowing yellow eyes, staring back at her from the underbrush. She whispered into her comm, keeping her voice steady. "Rose, not the time." "Oh, I disagree," Rose replied breezily. "If not now, then when? Give me an update. I need to know if I'm about to lose an employee, a goblin, or both." Evelyn didn't answer immediately, her attention focused on the rustling bushes ahead. Slowly, she drew her blade, its faint shimmer catching the starlight. Her heart raced, but she kept her breathing calm. Then, with a soft yip, a raccoon emerged, its nose twitching as it eyed her warily before scurrying away. "Seriously?" Evelyn muttered under her breath, lowering her blade. "Was that a squirrel?" Argoz's voice crackled over the comm, barely suppressing her laughter. "Or was it going to eat you, Ev?" Evelyn groaned, pushing herself up slightly. "It was a raccoon. Thank you very much. And I'd like to see you do better." "Ladies," Rose interjected, her tone amused. "Focus. Do I need to remind you what happens if you screw this up?" "Got it under control," Argoz replied curtly. She tapped her comm off and scanned the area ahead. "Come on, Evelyn. We're circling to the barn." The pair moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they worked their way toward the large barn on the edge of the compound. The building loomed in the faint light, its weathered red boards blending into the darkness. The faint sound of shuffling hooves and soft snorts carried through the still air. When they reached the barn's side entrance, Argoz held up a hand, signaling Evelyn to wait. She eased the door open just enough to slip inside, her sharp eyes adjusting quickly to the dim interior. Rows of stalls lined the barn, each occupied by horses shifting restlessly in their spaces. Most were calm, their ears twitching at her presence, but one stall at the far end caught her attention. A massive black stallion pawed at the ground, its glossy coat gleaming faintly in the faint light. Its fiery eyes locked onto her, and it let out a low, challenging snort. Argoz smirked, whispering to herself, "Oh, you're a feisty one." She moved cautiously, keeping her movements slow and deliberate as she approached the stallion. The other horses watched her curiously, but this one remained tense, its ears pinning back as it shifted its weight. "Easy, big guy," Argoz murmured, holding out a hand. "I'm not here to steal your oats or whatever." The stallion's nostrils flared and it stomped a hoof, the sound reverberating through the barn. Argoz glanced back toward the door where Evelyn waited, signaling her to stay put. Turning her attention back to the stallion, she noticed something. A thin leather halter hung loosely around its neck, engraved with the name Onyx. "You've got an owner, huh?" she murmured. "And I bet you're not too friendly with strangers." The stallion snorted again, its ears flicking forward as Argoz slowly stepped closer. When she was within reach, it lunged forward suddenly, its teeth snapping just short of her hand. "Whoa!" she hissed, stumbling back. "All right, I get it. Personal space." Evelyn slipped into the barn, her expression tense as she caught sight of the interaction. "Argoz, what are you doing?" "Making friends," Argoz replied dryly, her eyes still on the stallion. "This guy's not big on company." "Well, we're not here for him," Evelyn said, her voice hushed. "Let's keep moving." Argoz nodded but couldn't help stealing one last glance at the stallion. Weird. He doesn't seem scared, just pissed. Whoever owns him must be someone important. "Or someone just as mean as he is," Evelyn muttered, tugging on her arm. "Come on, we don't have time for this." They slipped out the back of the barn, sticking to the shadows as they moved deeper into the compound. The faint hum of music and distant laughter from the pavilion grew louder, mixing with the occasional bark of dogs and the quiet rustling of the river nearby. Argoz tapped her comm, her voice steady. "Rose, we're past the barn. Looks like there's some kind of party going on in the centre. Patrols are light but steady." Rose's reply crackled back, her tone biting. "Lovely. Just don't let the goblin curiosity get you killed. Keep moving and clear the path." Evelyn glanced at Argoz, her expression grim. "Let's finish this. The sooner we're in and out, the better." The compound sprawled out before Argoz and Evelyn, illuminated faintly by the starlight and the soft glow of the pavilion bonfire. It had the deceptive charm of a rustic retreat, with cabins by the river, barracks-like dorms, and the imposing bulk of a large central building. But everything about it screamed control. Patrols moved with precision, and the layout seemed too intentional to be a simple camp. Argoz crouched lower in the shadow of the barn, her sharp eyes scanning the area. "What is this place? Some kind of private retreat?" "Not with security like this," Evelyn murmured, her voice low. "It's too organised. Look at those patrols, trained, methodical. And the dogs? Definitely not for show." Argoz adjusted her position, her eyes flicking to the fenced-off perimeter. Whatever this is, they're serious about keeping it locked down. Evelyn tapped her comm, whispering to Caleb. "We're seeing a large compound, multiple outbuildings, a fence, cameras and patrols. Armed. Looks military or government." "Great," Caleb replied dryly. "And here I thought I'd signed up for a nice, simple break-in." The pair moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they worked their way closer to the centre of the compound. A low hum of music drifted toward them, mingling with the crackle of a bonfire. From her vantage point, Argoz could see clusters of people, men and women dressed casually, yet their movements betrayed training. They weren't just relaxing, they were keeping an eye on their surroundings. Evelyn frowned as she observed them. They don't look like civilians. Too disciplined. And not Black Dawn either, Argoz added. They're too polished. They paused near the edge of the clearing, crouched behind a row of bushes. A large pavilion dominated the centre of the compound, its bonfire casting flickering light across the relaxed but watchful gathering. "This place gives me the creeps," Evelyn muttered, her grip tightening on her blade. "Yeah," Argoz replied, her eyes narrowing, "but it also feels like we're onto something big." Back at the barn, Evelyn scanned their surroundings again, her nerves on edge. "We need to figure out what they're guarding here. This kind of setup isn't cheap or casual." Argoz nodded, her gaze flicking to a black stallion in the far stall. "And it's not just the people. Even the animals here look like they're ready to throw down." The stallion pawed the ground, its fiery eyes watching Argoz closely. She smirked. "Bet this guy's got a mean streak." "Focus," Evelyn said, pulling her back. "We need to stick to the mission." As they slipped back into the shadows, Evelyn tapped her comm again. "Caleb, we're seeing what looks like a mix of recreational areas, dorms, and maybe some sort of operations building. Too clean for Black Dawn. It's got to be government or military." "Fantastic," Caleb muttered. "So how do you want to play this?" "We'll keep moving," Argoz said. "But whatever this place is, it's got more layers than we thought." The Shadow Realm bar hummed with its usual blend of low conversation and barely concealed intrigue. Shadows flickered across the rune-etched walls, shifting with the moods of the patrons. Deals were whispered, drinks clinked, and the subtle thrum of magic hung in the air. At her usual corner booth, Rose leaned back with a glass of something potent and amber in her hand. Her eyes, sharp as ever, flicked to her phone resting on the table. The comm channel connecting her to Argoz and the others had gone quiet for the past 20 minutes. Too quiet. She drummed her fingers on the table, her dark nails clicking softly against the worn wood. Patience wasn't her strong suit. It was an unfortunate necessity for someone in her line of work, but that didn't make it any easier to endure. "Still waiting?" Silas's deep voice broke her thoughts. Rose glanced up as the bar manager appeared beside her table, his expression calm but his gaze knowing. Silas had a way of reading people that always set Rose on edge, though she'd never admit it. He gestured to the empty seat across from her with a raised brow. She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't you have someone to intimidate or a rule breaker to banish?" "Not tonight," he replied, sliding into the seat uninvited. "Seems you've cornered the market on intimidating stares. What's eating at you, Rose?" Rose raised her glass, taking a slow sip before answering. "Just waiting for my crew to stumble into or out of trouble. The usual." Silas tilted his head, studying her. "And you're not out there with them because—" Rose shot him a sharp look. "Because someone has to keep this place running. Besides, the woods? Bugs? I'd rather set myself on fire." He chuckled, low and gravelly. "You'd be surprised what you can endure when it matters." "Oh, spare me the philosophy," Rose said, rolling her eyes. "They'll manage. They always do." Just as she began to relax, her comm crackled to life. Caleb's voice came through, hushed but urgent. "Rose, we've got movement on the other side of the fence. Could be nothing, but thought you'd want to know." Rose sighed, setting her glass down and straightening in her seat. "Of course, what's a quiet night without a little chaos?" Silas's voice. "Don't let your impatience ruin the plan, Rose." "Wouldn't dream of it," she replied with a sharp grin. Argoz crouched low behind a bush, her sharp eyes darting toward the dorms as two figures strolled past. They were a young man and woman, their uniforms casual yet tidy, their voices carrying softly on the night air. From the way they leaned toward each other, heads bent in quiet conversation, they didn't seem like they were worried about patrols or intruders. Evelyn, pressed against the shadowed side of the barn, flicked her hand in a subtle signal for Argoz to stay quiet and listen. Final exams tomorrow, the young woman said, her tone tinged with nerves. I swear, if I don't nail the K9 field test, I'm screwed. You'll do fine, the young man replied, though his voice lacked conviction. It's not like they're expecting perfection. Just don't freeze up. Easy for you to say, she shot back, exhaling sharply. You aced the last scenario. Me. I couldn't get the tactical sequences right even after 3 tries. They passed close enough for Argoz to catch the faint scent of soap and sweat. The woman's companion gave her a nudge. You're overthinking it. Just focus on the basics. As they moved further away, their words became muffled, but another pair of voices emerged from a different direction. 2 men were walking slower, their conversation less hushed. I'm telling you, one said, his tone animated. If I don't get into the counter-terrorism unit, what's the point? Counter-terrorism's overrated, the other replied. Covert ops is where it's at. The perks alone are insane. You know who just got into covert? Robbins. That guy couldn't hit a moving target to save his life. Yeah, well, connections are everything. You think my wish list is even going to matter without someone higher up pulling strings? Their voices faded as they disappeared toward the dormitory entrance. Evelyn turned her head toward Argoz, her expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. She whispered into her comm. Caleb, you catching this? Yeah, Caleb's voice came through softly. Sounds like a training facility. More than that, Evelyn replied. They're federal trainees. These people are being groomed for fieldwork, covert ops, counter-terrorism. This isn't some backwoods security outfit. Argoz slid closer, her face thoughtful. Final exams? Job placement? They're not just training, they're recruiting. Recruiting for what, though? Caleb asked. Nothing good, if you ask me, Evelyn muttered. This explains the discipline, the structure. It's all federal. But the question is, what are they hiding here? What's so important that they've got a perimeter like this? Argoz narrowed her eyes, glancing toward the dorms again. Whatever it is, it's not just about training. You don't have this kind of setup unless you're guarding something, or someone. Evelyn gestured for Argoz to move back into deeper cover. Once they were secure, she whispered, We need to get closer to the main building. If this is a training facility, the records are probably in there. Rosters, programs, maybe even what they're guarding. Fine, Argoz replied, adjusting her gear. But I go first. You stay put until I clear the way. Evelyn hesitated, but she nodded. Be careful. This isn't just some run-of-the-mill break-in. Argoz grinned, her sharp teeth glinting in the faint light. Careful's my middle name. As she slipped off into the shadows, Evelyn tapped her comm again. Caleb, keep the engine ready. If this goes sideways, we're going to need a quick exit. Already ahead of you, Caleb replied. And I'm keeping the radio open. Don't do anything reckless. Reckless? Us? Evelyn said with a smirk, though her eyes stayed focused on the compound ahead. Rose was glued to her comm, keeping tabs on Argoz and the others. The quiet updates trickling in from Caleb and Evelyn were doing little to settle her restlessness. Training facility? Federal operations? The pieces weren't falling into place quickly enough for her liking. Rose tapped her glass, summoning the bartender's attention. A refill materialized almost instantly, but she barely acknowledged it. Her mind was elsewhere. The night was still, the air thick with the anticipation of their next move. Argoz crouched low, her sharp eyes fixed on the darkened silhouette of the large building ahead. Beside her, Evelyn adjusted her comm, her breath steady but shallow. The facility's faint glow stretched out before them, shadows cast long and deep under the sparse lighting. Ready? Evelyn whispered, her voice low but firm. Always, Argoz replied, her smirk hidden in the darkness. They had just begun to shift forward when a soft, rippling glow caught their attention. Argoz paused, her sharp senses immediately on edge. Evelyn turned, her eyes narrowing as she followed Argoz's gaze. To the north, the sky had come alive. The northern lights painted the horizon in radiant shades of pink and purple, their undulating waves spreading across the sky like living ribbons of light. The brilliance of the display cast an otherworldly glow over the treetops, reflecting faintly off the compound's structures. The sight was mesmerizing, beautiful, and unexpected. Evelyn let out a soft breath, her voice tinged with awe. I didn't think we'd see those this far south. Neither did I, Argoz muttered, her eyes narrowing. But we're not here to stargaze. The ethereal glow shifted, growing brighter. The faint hum of its energy seemed to hum in their ears, a sensation that made the hairs on the back of Argoz's neck stand on end. It wasn't just natural, it couldn't be. The timing was too perfect. Evelyn, ever the practical one, reached out to touch Argoz's arm. Let's focus. The lights are a distraction. Don't let it throw you. Before they could move, a low, rhythmic thrum cut through the stillness. It started faint, but quickly grew louder. A helicopter, its lights flickering faintly against the glowing sky. The aircraft rose from the northern edge of the compound, its sleek form silhouetted against the aurora. Helicopter, Argoz whispered, pressing herself against the nearest tree for cover. Her eyes tracked its movement, watching as it hovered briefly before banking sharply to the west. Think they're on to us? Evelyn asked, her tone low but tense. Argoz shook her head. Not likely. If they knew we were here, they wouldn't be leaving. This is something else. The helicopter's powerful spotlight swept across the trees below, a fleeting search that made both women duck instinctively. The beam passed over them without stopping, but the tension lingered. Evelyn adjusted her comm, her voice steady but urgent. Caleb, you seeing this? The radio crackled softly before his voice came through. Yeah, looks like they're heading away from the compound. Maybe north toward the mountains. You two okay? We're fine, Evelyn replied. But this place just got a lot more interesting. As the helicopter's noise faded into the distance, the compound seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm. The faint sound of laughter drifted from the pavilion, while the K9 patrol continued its steady loop near the fence. The glow of the northern lights persisted, a surreal backdrop to their mission. Argoz adjusted her grip on the comm, her voice decisive. The lights and the helicopter are a distraction, but we stick to the plan. I'm heading for the main building. Evelyn, you stay here and keep an eye on the patrols. Be careful, Evelyn said, her tone softer now. I don't like how casual this place feels. It's like they don't think anyone would ever dare come here. Argoz smirked, though her expression didn't quite reach her eyes. Good. That means they won't see me coming. With that, she moved forward, her movements as silent and fluid as a shadow, leaving Evelyn to watch her back under the shimmering light of the aurora.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next. Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.